If a Deadpool movie does something stupid and Deadpool himself isn't there to lampshade it, did it even happen? That's the sort of conundrum we're stuck with when pondering the most controversial moments from the Merc with a Mouth's cinematic escapades. Death comes for us all, but one demise in this franchise sparked more than its fair share of controversy. When Vanessa died in Deadpool 2, many viewers were upset that this beloved character was killed just to advance the story. Some even threw out accusations of fridging, which refers to a trope in which a female character dies a gruesome death for no reason other than to motivate the male hero. Critics have debated whether Vanessa's death actually constitutes fridging. The Mary Sue's Princess Weeks argues that it does, especially because there were other potential ways to motivate Deadpool. However, others aren't so sure. Vox has pointed out that Vanessa was fleshed out and three-dimensional in the first movie, so it can hardly be said that she exists solely to motivate her love interest. Even Gail Simone, the comic writer who coined the term fridging, weighed in by writing, "One of the main tropes of the women in refrigerators storytelling cliché is that after the woman is killed or whatever, she no longer really exists in the story. Her agony is just a motivator, and she's never really a person in that scenario. And Vanessa is still very much important to the story after her death, as she talks with Wade from beyond the grave. And in fact, she's also set to appear in 2024's Deadpool and Wolverine." Deadpool isn't shy about poking fun at other superheroes, even ones as iconic as Batman. But one line from Deadpool 2 hit a little too close to home for some fans of the Caped Crusader. When Wade shows up late for his anniversary celebration with Vanessa, he concocts a series of excuses, including this particular potshot.
"I was fighting a caped badass. Then we discovered his mom is named Martha, too."
This is a reference to an infamous scene from 2016's Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, in which the Dark Knight changes his mind about killing Superman after he discovers that they both have a mother named Martha. Some reviewers thought that the Deadpool 2 line was a hoot, but others insisted that it was a little uncalled for, especially since it had already been memed to death on the internet. As one person put it bluntly on the DC Cinematic Universe subreddit, "I think the Martha jokes are lazy." In an interview with Empire Film podcast, Ryan Reynolds defended the Martha joke, insisting, "I think Deadpool is willing to break a few eggs to make that omelet." However, he also noted, "I didn't write that joke, I'll say that one. That's one joke I didn't write." The promotional campaign for Once Upon a Deadpool, the PG-13 cut of Deadpool 2, included a poster in the style of an iconic religious painting. But instead of Jesus, it features Deadpool wearing angelic robes. Some devout Christians were understandably offended by the implicit comparison. The idea that religious people would find Deadpool offensive is hardly breaking news, though. And this is far from the only time that Wade Wilson has poked fun at religion.
"I am Marvel Jesus."
But this particular controversy is worth mentioning because the poster's detractors accused it of targeting one denomination in particular. A petition on change.org insisted that it mocked the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormon Church. The poster parodies The Second Coming by Harry Anderson, an artist who produced dozens of commissioned works for the LDS Church. The petition claimed that the poster was a case of religious discrimination. However, as an article in the ABA Journal points out, while the poster may not be particularly sensitive toward Mormons, it's not technically discrimination from a legal standpoint. The X-Force team has taken a long journey to get to the big screen. At one point, there was an X-Force movie in the works with Deadpool as the villain, but ultimately Deadpool 2 marked their first big screen appearance. However, instead of serving as a superhero team-up, the movie kills off the members of X-Force one by one. The makers of Deadpool 2 took this subversive twist so seriously that they went out of their way to film fight scenes with the members of X-Force that would only appear in the trailer. Unfortunately, not everybody thought that this fake-out was a riot, as some fans were actually kind of hoping to see X-Force in action in the final cut. Others did appreciate the joke, but were upset that the trailer was deliberately misleading. Then there are those viewers who felt that this jarring plot twist was actually foreshadowed too heavily. As Leopold Knopp of Real Entropy wrote, "No matter how funny others may have found it, I saw it coming a mile away and kind of just wanted that 10 minutes back." In particular, many fans were disappointed that Peter, the only guy without superpowers, didn't survive. To be fair, the filmmakers were also sad to see him go, so much so that they gave him a second chance at life, thanks to a bit of time travel in the post-credit scene. Plus, he's also set to return in Deadpool and Wolverine. One unforgettable montage from the first Deadpool offers something you rarely see from a superhero, as Wade invites Vanessa to wear a strap-on dildo and penetrate him from the rear. Alas, he's visibly uncomfortable and ultimately backs out, but it's the thought that counts. It's rare to see mainstream sex scenes that cater to anything besides heteronormative male desire, but Deadpool was happy to challenge assumptions about power dynamics in the bedroom.
Your crazy matches my crazy. Big time.
However, not everyone thought that this moment was as revolutionary as the filmmakers surely hoped it would be. Some have argued that this taboo-breaking moment is less meaningful if Wade treats it as a chore to be undergone only once a year. For example, Maddie Myers of The Mary Sue suspected that the movie shied away from showing Wade's pleasure out of fear that audiences would reject it as too gay. Although it is worth noting that Wade seems more eager to try pegging with Vanessa again in Deadpool 2. Long before the release of the first Deadpool, director Tim Miller announced that the Merc with a Mouth would indeed be pansexual on the big screen, just like he is in the comics. However, it turned out that the movie ultimately barely referenced his sexual orientation, which outraged many fans. To be fair, it makes sense that the plot doesn't stray much from him and Vanessa, since this heterosexual relationship happens to be central to his origin story. Yet never once is Deadpool shown sleeping with any men. The closest we get is a brief kiss he gives to a pizza delivery guy, but even then it's pretty clear he's just messing with him. Certainly, there are plenty of flirty lines and visual gags, plus a remark that suggests Deadpool is intimately familiar with Wolverine's private parts, but his attraction to other genders is never given the same weight as his attraction to women.
That is a no-go on the Tipperoogier.
This is rectified somewhat in Deadpool 2 as Wade passionately professes his love to Colossus and feels up the metal giant, but even then, some critics have accused Marvel of tiptoeing around Deadpool's queerness. After all, his courting of the metal mutant is never really consummated and is mostly played for laughs. Deadpool 2 is controversial partly because it's the first superhero movie to depict an openly queer couple, but also because we barely get to see them. Ultimately, Negasonic Teenage Warhead and Yukio's time in the film amounts to barely more than a cameo. As S.E. Fleenor wrote on the LGBT website Them, they show up for mere seconds in the movie, mainly to hold hands, as if the movie's creators were just throwing its hungry queer audience a bone. Simply put, Yukio is nothing more than a supporting character of a supporting character, and she adds almost nothing to the plot. In theory, she could have been omitted entirely, and nobody would have noticed. But if that were the case, Deadpool 2 would have been a little less groundbreaking, and the superhero genre's history of queer representation would have remained even more pitiful. Nevertheless, other viewers were glad to see some queer representation, even if it was only for a few minutes, especially considering that Yukio saves Colossus from Juggernaut almost effortlessly. Furthermore, if nothing else, Deadpool 2 treats this queer couple as perfectly normal, which is a pretty big step forward. It's even more impressive that the Merc with a Mouth doesn't crack a single joke at Yukio's expense. The time travel at the end of Deadpool 2 makes essentially zero sense, a fact that some fans were quick to decry. For one thing, if Cable had only one time travel charge left, why did he need to choose between going back in time to save Deadpool and returning to the future to be with his family? Why not travel to a time when he could grab all the charges that he needed? And then there's the post-credits sequence. Though Cable cannot fix his time machine, Negasonic Teenage Warhead somehow manages to repair it, despite knowing nothing about time travel. Then Deadpool goes back in time to prevent Vanessa's death, disregarding that this would surely create a paradox. As one viewer put it on the X-Men subreddit, if Vanessa hadn't died, I feel like the rest of the movie's conflict wouldn't even have happened beforehand. Since Deadpool would no longer be grieving Vanessa's loss, who knows if he would still have tried to save Russell? And without the specific chain of events that led to him befriending Cable and getting his hands on the time machine, how could he have gone back in time to save Vanessa to begin with? Although we suppose that instead of getting all worked up over these paradoxes, it's easier to just accept that it's not really supposed to make sense.
God, that's lazy writing.
Whenever the Deadpool movies stumble into a plot hole or start to fall back on cliches, Wade simply breaks the fourth wall to lampshade the mistake and then carries on as usual. This is especially true of Once Upon a Deadpool, as the framing device with Fred Savage openly acknowledges some complaints that were made after the release of Deadpool 2. For instance, he highlights one of the lines from the original cut in which Cable brushes aside a plot hole with a convenient bit of exposition, and Deadpool protests,
Well, that's just lazy writing.
In response, Savage declares that joking about your own lazy writing doesn't justify it.
Why do you think audiences will be stupid enough to swallow this?
While Deadpool's constant lampshading might be funny, many critics have argued that this is no substitute for writing a good story to begin with. Sure, it's nice that Once Upon a Deadpool acknowledges that Vanessa has been fridged, but it doesn't change the outcome of the story or give her character any more agency. And just because Deadpool announces a big CGI fight is about to happen, it doesn't change how cliché of a plot development that is. When Wade and Vanessa are bonding in the first Deadpool, they share their past trauma in a joking manner and even try to one-up each other.
I was molested.
Me too. Uncle.
Uncles. They took turns.
This could be interpreted as a moment of empathy that brings these two people closer, or it could simply be seen as an example of really poor taste. Some viewers were understandably upset by this moment, as anything that takes such a casual attitude toward rape is arguably crossing a line. Of course, it's worth noting that Deadpool is a rape survivor in the comics, and his cheeky facade is simply a way for him to cover up all the pain he's experienced. Dan Van Winkle of the Mary Sue interpreted the trauma jokes as Wade relying on humor as a coping mechanism. And while laughter may not be the most healthy response in this situation, it can certainly be cathartic for abuse survivors. Likewise, so long as viewers are laughing at the abuser and not at the victim, joking about past abuse can be an important method of coping. But this scene is the only time that the movie mentions that Wade is an abuse survivor, so a lot of viewers might miss this subtext.